going to have an event on September 21st about what it means to be human, and that's very much based on the book by the same name. And one of the means of what it means to be human is collaboration. One
Hmm.
of the biggest joys that we have as humans is work relationships and to produce something together. And one of our previous speakers and person who was going to join us again is Pindar Wong. And Pindar, your CV is so long, it would take up, I guess, the 10 minutes that we have for this introduction. So I'm going to skip that and go to the three questions that I have for you. The first one is, what do you mean by means of cooperation? And the second one is, what is female money? And the
Hmm.
third one is, does any of this exist, or how do you imagine that we create it? And the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you very much. And gosh, where to begin? Maybe just riffing off what you're saying in terms of what makes us human, in many ways, is our ability to cooperate. Why? Through the use of language and through the use of, I guess, our own imaginations, that we want to imagine that we can work together towards a common goal. That's, I guess, how I would define cooperation when two or more people, two or more parties work together. And historically, we've got, I guess, cooperation through existential issues, like, we cooperate in warfare when we have an existential crisis. We have, I guess, formal and informal means of cooperation. The formal ones, I think we know as today as our money systems, which, I may not know you or you may not know me, but we can cooperate, albeit in a transactional manner, through the use of money. And we have informal systems like our friends and family. So what we have right now, I think, is a crisis in cooperation. And what I mean by the means of cooperation is who decides with whom you can cooperate. It's like saying, who has a say on who's your friend. And my belief is that looking at language from traditional framings of like the means of production, traditional dichotomies between capitalist and socialist systems, etc., that one can actually reduce that sort of that language down to the essence of what makes us human is this ability to cooperate towards a common goal. Now, with the invent of, I guess, cryptocurrencies, I think there are now more than 2 million of these cryptocurrencies. What has been shown through, I guess, the first one that's been widely known like Bitcoin is that there is a different way now that private interests or just anyone with a laptop can try to create their own form of money. The problem I'm going to try to talk about is that this form of money is probably no better than, or it's the same class of money as the existing financial system, being mail money, being transactional. Either you have it or I have it, and we can only really play zero-sum games, primarily because of the accounting involved, and that there is an opportunity before us to create a different kind of money to break this sort of monoculture in money that we have that was identified by Bernard Lietaer, who was a currency trader and a sort of an academic in sort of the history of money. So the means of cooperation is the observation that we are born into a cooperation system. You could view that using the language of money as being born into a financial system where there is a coin of the realm, US dollar, euro, Hong Kong dollar, what have you, and that for formal cooperation, that is currently sort of the way things are structured. That if we want to cooperate and obtain resources, we have to have so-called enough money in that unit of account, and that sort of gates the degree of cooperation that we have. That said, if we look at the world today, the systems that we have, these sort of mail money systems where we can only really play zero-sum games because of the nature of the money involved and the nature of the accounting involved, is that we can cooperate at sort of at the scale of nations or maybe regions like the European Union, but we are really failing to cooperate at the global level. In fact, it looks like it's going the opposite way. And that might be a problem, I would say, of the actual kind of money that we have. And so, what I think is very urgent is that we observe that we may need a different kind of money than the one that we have. This is not my observation. In fact, it was Bernard Lietaer's observation some 20 years ago. You can look at the literature and body of work that he's produced. What's different today is that we have the means of deployment through software, through the different cryptocurrencies that are, again, principally male orientated or the zero sum. And what I'm suggesting here is that we look at developing a different kind of non-zero sum money or means of cooperation that we can play positive sum games, where this whole notion of what is a bond and what is the interest, instead of a private interest being a common interest, will allow us to scale cooperation at sort of planetary size. So what can we observe? We can observe today that in the old framing, so the old worldview of nation state actors, that networks these days are in fact bigger than many nations. Take some of the social networks that we have. There are over 2 billion monthly active users, which is larger than the populations of India and China combined. So in this world of networks, we have the opportunity to deploy something that really is beyond borders, government borders or nation state actors comprising of countries. And we can actually try to coordinate for common good services, so-called public goods. Now, here we have a difficulty because the existing money systems, the coin of the realm, the distribution of wealth is traditionally administered by governments, and they're not sort of administered by networks themselves, which has led to a lot of interest in these blockchain systems, which are just algorithmic. They don't see borders because the virtue of the internet doesn't see borders, and the ability to distribute wealth and to participate in an economy that's not defined by your geographical border, Bitcoin, for example, allows a different kind of opportunity. So, what really is the problem? Well, if we go back to what makes us a human and our ability to cooperate, um, if we observe the problem is that we have a monoculture in this sort of the means of cooperation, for formal cooperation being the existing financial system, where there is, I would say, a monoculture in the kind of money that we have, principally allowing only zero-sum games, so-called male money, which is Bernard Lietaer's observation, to that we need to another kind of sort of complementary kind of money, which is also his observation, which was female money, where we can not sort of me money, where either I have it or you have it, but sort of we money where we can jointly own something. So what's really required, and the reason why I've tried to introduce this means of cooperation, is really to introduce this notion of cooperation chemistry, and that we really the bonds that bind us, we really only got one kind of interest and one kind of bond. For those of you who are sort of familiar with the great enterprises of the past, one thing I use today to illustrate this cooperation chemistry is that we held Scaling Bitcoin 3 in the city of Milan. And in Milan, there is a wonderful cathedral called the Duomo of Milan, which took 600 years to build. And my challenge to some of the Italians that I met there, or my argument was, we could not build that cathedral as a place of worship today, given the existing cooperation system that we have. Can we make a 600-year commitment to, or in using the current framing, finance the building of a cathedral for a project that lasts 600 years? Said another way, forests. Is it in our financial interest to build a forest of pine trees or a forest of oak trees when oak trees take that much longer to grow? So the means of cooperation in the existing framing under this existing system of money, I would argue prevents that. And what we have using sort of the chemistry equivalent is only one kind of chemical bond, where we sort of count who owns the electron or where's the electron, being where's the unit of account, very much like ionic bonds in chemistry. And it's like our whole world is only created through this polarized view of ionic bonds, which, as you know from high school, we count, the exchange of electrons and the bond is created through electrostatic attraction between positive and negative. So it's polarized view. And so this female money, this yin money, is where we have, again, using the chemical equivalent of covalent bonds, where we don't really care about, who has the electron, who has the money, so to speak, because the electron is shared between the two different parties participating in the covalent bond, or the elements there, using this analogy. And that it doesn't need to be zero sum. In fact, it can be positive sum. In fact, it might allow whole different kinds of um, economic exchanges, because we don't care about the electron itself and counting how many we have and who currently owns that electron. Really, it's the strength, excuse me, the strength of the chemical bond between us. So that's kind of like friendships or kinships. Those bonds tend to be resilient to mistakes. It might not be necessary to count exactly who owes what, rather that there's a joint enterprise. So the notion here is that if we introduce this missing money, we only have male money. If we introduce this female money with these covalent bonds, where the analogy is that we could, what kind of biological world, what kind of biological ecosystem could we build that when taken together, you have something that's neutral and more balanced. So the observation here is that we have only one kind of money in existence today. The most male of male money, I would argue, is Bitcoin. It's extremely clear, it's extremely cut and dry, it's extremely transparent. And what I'm arguing is that we need a different kind of worldview, a different kind of money built with these female monies, which are covalent bonds. Now, what is the purpose of this? The purpose of this is, in many ways, to change our worldview. To me, we are in the age of the Wright brothers. We've flown maybe 30 meters, and 50 years later, we're on the moon, and cryptocurrencies have demonstrated the ability for financial flight, I guess, would be the equivalent. And that since we've actually now demonstrated that you can create something out of nothing, Bitcoin, and if we observe that we can create different kinds of money, that we have an opportunity to bring back balance and potentially cooperate again at global scale and to bring things back into balance.